Greg Sankey says the SEC remains the best conference in college football by far. By far, he says. And he says he's got the metrics that prove it. Never mind, I guess, that the Big Ten has 3 straight national championship trophies. Is Sankey losing the plot? We'll discuss today on this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. Also today, we'll get into why Texas Tech is challenging Texas to a Week 1 football game, and will Steve Sarkisian take the bait? Probably not. Welcome in. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. John, much to discuss about Sankey's comments out of SEC spring meetings last week. It was really an inconsequential spring meetings. The presidents and chancellors didn't vote on any issues. So really the headlines coming out of the meetings were Sankey's response to a question I had asked him on day 3 of the meetings about why the Big Ten has surpassed the SEC in college football and what, if anything, Sankey can do to change course. I thought that was a pretty standard question, but Sankey seemed taken aback by that and initially refuted that is even happening. As we dive into this, I'm curious, just in general, your reaction when you saw that Greg Sankey said that the SEC remains by far the best conference in college football.
I was impressed that he said that in such convincing fashion. I mean, he drifted straight into fantasy land when he came up with that. If we want to go back in time when SEC won those 7 straight national titles, or a little further along when they won 3 more national titles, I don't remember anybody from the Big Ten saying, we're really the best conference by far. So the metrics, other than those 3 national titles, I don't know what he's counting on. I like the fact that he went with a kind of like, well, sometimes a ball just bounces a funny way. It's almost so he's saying basically that the Big Ten's had a really lucky run here, and the SEC is dominant as ever. You would have a hard time convincing anybody who saw the Alabama-Indiana game of that, but there were a lot of bouncing balls going the Hoosiers' way, as you recall, in that game.
I do recall that. And I recall a game I covered in Columbus, Ohio, the year before that, in which a lot of the bounces went Ohio State's way in a
Yes.
blowout of the Tennessee Vols in a playoff game. So, yeah, so here was sort of the scene. This was day 3 of spring meetings, and you know how these meetings go, John. Sankey holds a press conference every evening, and by the time you get to day 3, we're just playing the hits at that point. So I raised this question, and like I said, I just kind of laid it out. The Big Ten has surpassed the SEC in football. Why or how has that happened, in the commissioner's opinion? And what could he do maybe to change the course? And I hadn't even finished my question yet when Sankey interrupted me. Sankey interrupted me, rattled a little bit, and said, "Well, what metrics was I using to formulate this premise that the Big Ten had surpassed the SEC in football?" And I said, "Well, the Big Ten's won 3 straight national championships, and the Big Ten is 4-0 head-to-head against SEC teams in the college football playoff the last 3 years." So those would be my metrics. And Sankey said, well, that's a narrow sample size, that 4-0 record that the Big Ten has against the SEC in playoff games the last 3 years. I didn't get into what happened in the Music City Bowl last year or the Reality Quest Bowl. I thought that was kind of beside the point. But he said that was a small sample size, A. B, he said in a closed-door meeting at the SEC spring meetings, he reviewed metrics that actually said he had the best conference in college football by far. Not really sure what these mysterious metrics indicated to make him believe that, but he saw those apparently in a closed-door meeting. And yeah, he proceeded to say, well, as you said, the ball bounces a funny way sometimes. He referenced a game that happened 10 years ago, which no current athlete probably remembers. And yeah, he kind of cruised past the 38-3 result in the Rose Bowl last year. There's a very brief mention of that, but not not too much. What I didn't really hear was maybe any sort of solutions or even ideas for how to get the SEC back on top. It was more just like sort of a denial that that the SEC wasn't on top anymore.
Denial works well in a lot of things, doesn't it? Think of all the things that deny. I'm really not drunk. I'm really not unemployed. I'm working. I'm working on inventing something. And
Yeah.
just wait till I get this done. I'll have a patent for this baby, and I'll be rolling in money. Uh, I wonder. He mentioned a narrow sample size. I wonder if he's including other things like. Does the SEC have the best tailgaters,
Mm.
best cheerleaders, the best marching bands, the best mascots? That's all a part of the landscape of college football, and maybe he's got some data on that. I know UGA, Georgia's mascot, is kind of a mascot star in college football. Ole Miss has the Grove, which is kind of the quintessential tailgating area. So maybe they're just other things. I think you probably failed in not digging deeper with follow-up questions.
Yeah.
Y-
What are these mysterious metrics that indicate you're lapping the field?
Yeah, like did you send the email those out in a press release and we just hadn't seen them? They always announce all the money. Well, we don't want to
Right.
go there because the Big Ten's making more money too. But
Right, right. Yeah,
yeah,
you're right, John. If I would have if I would have been a more veteran journalist such as
sure.
yourself, I might have followed up with, okay, so if the 4-0 record that the Big Ten has the last 3 years against the SEC in playoff games, if that doesn't matter, if that's not the metric we're going by, and if we're not going by national championships, what, pray tell, is the metric that Greg Sankey is using that tells him that not only is the SEC the best conference, it's the best conference by far.
Oh,
Um,
that was the kill shot there was when he just tacked that on like, you know, the bigger lie is supposed to be a way to go sometimes when you're big question, just go bigger, double down, not just no, it's not just better, it's better by this incredible margin. We're laughing at the Big Ten, it's so much better.
yeah, I
The
think
Big Ten better try and stay ahead of the Big 12.
right. I think Kurt Signetti's laughing at everybody, but it's interesting, John. Years ago, when Greg Sankey inherited a clunker in men's basketball in the SEC, you remember the situation when he took
Mhm.
over as commissioner. The SEC had it going on in a lot of sports. He inherited a good situation in a lot of sports. He did not inherit a good situation in men's basketball. The SEC was in a bad way in men's hoops. Not only was it not winning national titles, it wasn't even getting a lot of bids into the NCAA tournament. And Greg Sankey met that problem head on and received a lot of praise for his leadership in that arena. He hired a couple of experts to address the problem at a conference level, someone who worked for the league office, and then also Mike Tranghese, the former Big East commissioner, was hired as a special advisor to the conference, and that was an issue that was acknowledged, and the conference sort of developed a league-wide strategy for how to fix that problem. It involved, better hiring, smarter scheduling, a number of factors that would kind of boost the RPI or the net or whatever the numbers the selection committee was using in that particular year that would give the SEC a better chance to get more teams invited to the dance. And we could say 10 years later, Greg Sankey's strategy on that front worked beautifully. I mean, just in 2025, 1 year ago, the SEC broke the college basketball record for most bids to an NCAA tournament, and Florida won the national title, ending the SEC's decade-plus drought for national championships in men's basketball. So that's sort of the 180 here of, in a different sport a decade ago, Sankey acknowledged that there was a problem, and he developed a strategy at the conference level for fixing it. This was really the opposite of that, denying even that a problem exists, and to the extent that it does exist, as you said, it was just a few lucky bounces. in the Big Ten's favor, which maybe that'll work. I think the one true thing that maybe Sankey said is that in some of these cases, the margins are narrow. The one true thing I heard was the SEC is not always getting blown out by the Big Ten. Sometimes it's getting blown out, like the Rose Bowl last year, but sometimes the SEC loses in close games to the Big Ten. So, in so much as there's any feather in the cap, it's that the gap doesn't appear to be that large. So maybe it's not a 5-alarm fire, or maybe it's a small issue, but I think there is an issue when your rival conference has won 3 straight national titles, and you have to go back 4 years to find the last time that an SEC team has defeated a Big Ten team in a playoff game. That was the 2022 season, and that instant classic between Georgia and Ohio State in the semifinals in Atlanta, which was really the de facto national championship game. Ohio State missed a field goal right at midnight, and Georgia prevailed. That was 4 years ago now, and that was the last time the SEC beat the Big Ten in a playoff game. The other chef's kiss from Sankey, John, was he told me that if the SEC was winning these games, I wouldn't be asking him about losing. Well, no kidding.
Wow. Captain Obvious just entered the room. Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Well, what do you think about that, though? Like, in so much as there is a gap, how big is it? Is this something that requires a conference-wide response, or is this like, yeah, the Big Ten's won 3 in a row, but nothing to panic about here? I mean, I think both of us see that, yes, there is. The Big Ten is on top right now, but is this a situation that calls for a league-wide strategy and response, or is this just a matter of, hey, maybe the gap's not that big, and this season we might be talking about the SEC being back on top?
I got a couple of suggestions. One might be hire better coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Another example might be welcome Texas Tech and mega booster Cody Campbell into the SEC. You bring in that NIL money, you'll win more against the Big Ten. Seriously, though, when you look at what just happened, the SEC has, I guess, with Kiffin going from Ole Miss to LSU, what's that? Is it 6 new coaches in the league for this season?
Yeah, 6 new coaches.
Okay. Lane Kiffin, an obviously big-time hire by LSU, as was Brian Kelly, of course, at the time. But you look at the other coaches who may all turn out to be dynasty builders. We don't know that. But when you look at the resumes of the new coaches in the league past, once beyond Lane Kiffin, there's no real wow factor. There's potential. There's hope. Alex Golish at Auburn, maybe he'll be the real deal. John Summerall could turn Florida around. Wherever you look, Pete Golding will turn out to be promoted from defensive coordinator, kind of a genius in waiting to continue Ole Miss's success, all that stuff. But when you look at what the Big Ten did, and it was lucky, I thought, but nonetheless,
The ball bounced its way. The ball bounced its way. John. That's
there
the way
you
gotta
go.
phrase it.
Very thin margin of error there, but I was pretty creative getting Kyle Whittingham at Michigan, who not only is a really good coach and had such a great run at Utah, but that guy looks like he should be the head coach at Michigan. Mm-hmm. He just looks like a tough guy. When you think of Michigan football at its best, you think of it just lining up and knocking Ohio State's defensive line off the ball and running for 280 yards and beating their arch rival Buckeyes. So I think he's such a good fit, but he's such a proven commodity. There's no question about Whittingham saying, well, I guess you could say, well, he did that at Utah, but no, he did it for a long time at Utah. He won a lot of games.
Well, not only that, John, but then Penn State gets Matt Campbell from Iowa State. Pretty good hire there, too, I thought.
Yeah, and you look at Matt Campbell's record, and you say, well, it's okay. It's pretty good. You got to understand what it's like being in Ames, Iowa, recruiting to Ames, Iowa for Iowa State. This is not one of the most blessed programs. It's not. I don't think it's brimming over with NIL money, but Matt Campbell won there, and he won for a long time. And remember, NFL teams were interested in Matt Campbell, and he said, no, thanks. Now he's going to Penn State. So I think those two hires, if you set aside Kiffin, who moves within the league in terms of overall gains, all the new SEC coaches, I don't think any of them, when you look at resumes, you would say are comparable to Whittingham's or Campbell's.
Yeah, and I think this goes to the larger point of top to bottom right now. I think the Big Ten has better coaches. I mean, you look a few years ago, Indiana getting Curt Cignetti. Now, at the time, who knew who Curt Cignetti was? Curt Cignetti didn't think you knew who he was. He told you to Google him. Well, now he looks like one of the best coaches in college football. And if you were starting a draft to just draft coaches of a generic program, I think Curt Cignetti would be one of the first, probably 3 or 4 coaches off the board right now. And I think, we mentioned the hiring cycle this year. I do think on the whole, the Big Ten has better coaches. And I think that's probably some truth to this. Like, although I asked the question to Greg Sankey because I thought as commissioner, he might have some thoughts on the matter, I really don't know how much of this is within his control. Now, maybe he can formulate some comprehensive strategy akin to the one he developed a decade ago for men's basketball. But I do think some of this comes down to when you get into these head-to-head matchups, sometimes the margins can be thin. And what is your head coach doing to, make sure that those margins favor your side? And I'm not sure that there's enough coaching talent in the SEC right now. There are some individual star coaches, no doubt about it. But top to bottom, I think the Big Ten is better. And it's just another interesting case, John, of how the argument keeps changing, the narrative, the rhetoric keeps changing inside the SEC. There was a stretch there where the SEC won 13 national championships in a 17-year span. And you know what they talked about at that time? They talked about national championships. They weren't saying, well, we got these mysterious metrics that tell us we're the best league by far. They said, we got the trophies. Of course, we're the best league. We're the ones chanting SEC, SEC at the end of the year. So there was a time they talked about championships, right? And then, like when Michigan won one and Ohio State got one the next year, they started talking about, well, the depth of the SEC, the top to bottom depth still favors the SEC. Well, now what's the rally cry we've heard this offseason? We've heard Kirby Smart and others say, well, the real strength of the SEC is in its last place teams.
Yeah.
Our worst teams are better than your worst teams has become the new rally cry. And in so much as that's true, you've already lost the argument by the time you're talking about your last place teams. The other thing we hear now, though, John, for SEC coaches and others in and around the league, of the argument of why the SEC is still the best conference. They talk about the total number of draft picks to come out of the SEC. Now, this year, the Big Ten had more first-round draft picks, but throughout 7 rounds, the SEC still led with the most draft picks overall. Now, that is a feather in the SEC's cap. But my question then would be to the coaches, if you have all this NFL talent, if the NFL is telling you you got more cumulative talent than any other conference, why have you not had a team in the national championship game for 3 straight years? Apparently, talent isn't the issue. Now, maybe you don't have such a lopsided advantage over the Big Ten as you used to, but there's still talent in the South. There's still good players at Alabama and Texas and Georgia and on down the line. Why haven't you got it done in the playoff? And so I do think a lot of this, the coaches have to take some of this on themselves. They usually don't. They'll come up with some excuse about how Arkansas is too tough, and that's why they can't win national championships anymore. But I do think some of this, that is the rebuttal to, well, the SEC has the most draft picks every year. That's true. They do. So why can't they get a team in the national championship game? I think some of that the coaches have to answer for.
Yeah, and I would really like to see the worst team in the Big Ten play the worst team in the SEC in a bowl game. I mean, I would watch Rutgers versus Mississippi State.
It was Purdue and Arkansas, but you apologize to Rutgers and Mississippi State, John.
Yeah, apologies to those guys because they're so much better than those other 2 programs. Yeah, that wasn't a fair comment. I take that back.
A cheap
Uh,
shot at Rutgers.
yeah, it really was. Yeah. Come on down here to Starkville and show us how tough you are, or at Fayetteville. Uh, when you go back and you look at those 13 national championships in 17 years, trying to think now, how many of those championships were won? Urban Meyer won 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Saban won 6 of
6.
them,
Yes.
and Kirby Smart won 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's 10
Of the 13.
of the 13, and those are considered 3 of the greatest coaches of all time. Kirby Smart's still at it, but I think most people, you say, name the best coach in college football, unless you Google Kirk Signetti, you would say, well, it's Kirby Smart, of course. He's won 2 national titles. He stands alone because of that. But you go back, and even in that 7-game championship winning streak by the SEC, it was 2 titles by Urban Meyer and 3 by Nick Saban. And nobody questions those 2 guys are right at the top of college football. So that was pre-NIL.
Mm-hmm.
And you had the best coaches won the most. So I think it's pretty obvious. I don't have again metrics. Greg Sankey may be able to hit us with a knuckleball or something that we never see coming in terms of metrics. But you look at right now, the most distinguished coaches, the best coaches as a group, I think, are in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten has won 3 consecutive national titles. So,
and fair or unfair, what you get judged by in this sport right now in the year
sure.
2026, it's the playoff, right? It's a 12-team playoff. It might keep getting bigger. That is what you're going to be judged by. And point blank, the SEC hasn't gotten it done the past few years. They've had, in the 12-team playoff, they've had more bids than any other conference. They've had 8 bids. They haven't been able to get a team to the national championship game. They haven't beat a Big Ten team. They haven't beat Notre Dame. Georgia lost to Notre Dame 2 seasons ago. So in these marquee matchups, Miami knocked out 2 SEC teams last year. And sure, the margins were small in those games against Miami, but Miami won them. And I don't even think you were going up against a coaching genius in Mario Cristobal, but Miami won the game. And that's what you're judged by. Fairly or unfairly, this is a playoff era. You're going to be judged by what happens in the playoff. And the last 3 years, it has not been a good run for the SEC. And so until such time as that changes, I flat out reject the idea that the SEC is by far the best conference in college football right now. We're not arguing history here. This isn't a history lesson. Of course, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nobody would argue that the SEC was the best conference in college football. You covered it every step of the way, John. The reason we knew it, in part, was because they were winning all the national championships. Not doing that anymore.
Blake, I think I can't apply metrics to this, but the Indiana-Alabama game, that to me was so revealing because Indiana looked like old Alabama teams that won national titles. Alabama looked a little bit like that TCU team that ran into Georgia in the national championship game a few years back. It looked utterly helpless. And how that occurred, how Indiana went from a basketball school and one of the worst programs in college football to the very best program, not just in one season, but a program, a team that will be viewed for a long time, maybe, as one of the greatest teams ever. It went 16-0, and it just completely dismantled Alabama, which was for the longest time until Kirby Smart got in the way and Nick Saban left. That was the SEC's marquee program. Just a few years removed from that, losing to one of the Big Ten's in college football's worst programs.
Mm-hmm. And SEC people would tell you, well, Alabama really wasn't one of the SEC's best teams last year. Well, they made it to Atlanta. They made it to Atlanta. They were the SEC's runner-up. They finished first in the regular season standings. So We can say that now, but part of the reason we say that now, John, is because Indiana beat them by 35 points. But
Yeah.
for all we know, Indiana would have beat any number of other SEC teams by 35 points. We do know they beat Alabama by 35 points, but might have been other teams that suffered that same fate. It's in the aftermath of all that we say, well, Alabama really wasn't the SEC's second best team. Well, the regular season told us that they were. They were the ones going to Atlanta and not somebody else. So it was what Indiana did to them in that playoff game that made us think maybe they weren't really all that great after all. And probably also what Georgia did to them in Atlanta. That was also a bellwether of where Alabama stood. But you're right. The symbolism of that, a longtime Big Ten doormat beating the brakes off of the most prestigious program in the South, maybe all of college football in Indiana, that was quite an image. Quite an image, I think. All right,
Yeah.
one other topic, John, I want to get into from spring meetings, and then we'll get into this saga brewing down in Texas between Texas and Texas Tech. Just a perfect story for the offseason. But before we go there, so we came into spring meetings expecting that no formal action would be taken from the SEC on the college football playoff debate. And that's what we walked away from. There was no formal action taken on this. But we heard some chatter about 24. Some people favor that. We heard some chatter. Some people in the SEC favor 16. Even heard from Chris Del Conte, the athletic director at Texas, said, I'm not so sure there's anything wrong with 12. Maybe we ought to stay at 12. So we heard a variety of opinions depending on who was at the microphone, who was holding court in front of the press. But when Greg Sankey was asked point blank in his Wednesday press conference, is it fair to say the SEC's official preference, its official stance, remains 16? He said yes. That is the official position of the conference. At this point, it's still 16 teams. Now, of course, that's subject to change. Debate on this could continue, but as it stands right now, beginning of June, the Big Ten's at 24, and the SEC, although it is not a unanimous opinion, there's a variety of opinions. The official stance from party headquarters, if you will, is 16. And as we know, as long as those stances remain as they are, Big Ten at 24, SEC at 16, the playoff cannot expand. These two super conferences, as it's contractually drawn up, have to agree to a number and format for expansion to occur. And if they don't agree, it remains status quo, which is 12. I'm fine with this, John. We've talked about different numbers. I think you and I would be fine with 16. Neither of us are too enamored with 24. I'm also fine with 12. If the SEC stays at 16 and the Big Ten stays at 24, that's fine. I don't see that a 12-team playoff is broken. Are there some good teams left out of the playoff? Sure. I also think that helps heighten the stakes of the regular season. I'm okay with it. What's your latest mood and feeling on this?
Yeah, the more I think about it, the less I like a 24-team playoff.
Mm-hmm.
I think we agree on that we both value the regular season. That's what makes college football so much fun, so special. It's all those teams playing every weekend. And you're going to lose a little of that when you think, how much do the games matter? What makes these games compelling is that they matter, is it that it leads to something. These games are crucial. Can't afford to lose this game, or you're done. You get 24 teams in the playoff, it starts to look a lot like the NFL. And the NFL does not hold my interest the way college football does. And that's not just because I write primarily about college football. In terms of just viewing, there are just so many games. The season goes on forever, it seems like. You're kind of
And no
waiting.
single game is that consequential, right? I mean,
No,
you lose on a
no,
particular Sunday in the NFL. Yeah, a bunch of people are watching. It's America's most popular league,
sure.
but it doesn't have what college football has of the every Saturday matters stakes. Now, some would say that already changed a little bit for college football when it went from 4 to 12, but I still think at 12 teams, the playoffs pretty exclusive. It's still got really, really high stakes every single Saturday. You double that to 24, that goes away. That or it is at least severely reduced.
Yeah, just think about how fans, when you're watching your team is playing in a game and you say a must-win game,
Mm-hmm.
a must-win game in the regular season, that's to me where all the pressure is, and that's what makes those games so watchable. You hang on every play in a close game because you know what the stakes are. You are going to lose, you're going to lose some of that. And what bothers me are these rematches a little bit. Uh, you play a regular season game in the middle of October. Two best teams in the SEC line up, and one of them wins, one of them loses. But then they both end up in the playoffs. It's like, well, how much did that win really mean to you? When at one point, there in the middle of October, it meant everything. And now it's just, oh, yeah, well, that was a regular season game. Now it's when it matters. Now it's when you show up. To me, it takes something away from some of your greatest victories.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, John. And I think there's kind of two groups of people here. It's, are you the type of person that says every good team has to be in the playoff? Or, if we ever have a good team left out of the playoff, that means we need to expand. If you're that type of person, then you think you need bigger than a 12 team playoff. You think you need 16 or 24 teams because you look at Notre Dame last year and you say, well, they were a good team and they got left out. And so if good teams are being left out, then we need a bigger playoff. Or are you the type of person that says it's okay if some good teams are left out of the playoff if the results of the regular season dictated that they didn't have the resume to get in? And it was interesting. We heard a variety of opinions on this during SEC spring meetings, but Mike Elko, the coach at Texas A&M, I thought, he put it best. He said, if it were up to him, he'd want a supersized playoff because he thinks all coaches are selfish. They're self-centered, and they believe, this may not be true, we've debated the truthfulness of this, but they believe the bigger the playoff, the more job security there is. But Mike Elko said if he puts his self-interest aside, he kind of favors a more exclusive playoff, kind of something like we have now. And as he put it, he's okay with good teams being left out of the playoff. And I'm paraphrasing his thoughts here, but that's what he said, that he's okay with good teams being left out. And I feel the same way. I don't want to see a 13-0 team left out of the playoff or a 12-1 team left out of the playoff, particularly, if you're from one of the Super 2 conferences, but you're not going to be. Texas was left out last year at 9-3. I thought Texas was a pretty good team. I thought Notre Dame by the end of the year was a pretty good team. But they both lost games during the regular season that damaged their resume to the extent that they got left on the cutting room floor, and I'm okay with that. But like I said, there's two groups of people, the people that are okay with that and the people that think you have to have a playoff so big that every good team is in it, and even some average ones.
If you go back to the 2024 season, look at that Ole Miss team. I thought its roster was probably as good as just about anybody's, maybe just shy of Ohio State. But I thought it was right up there with Texas and Ohio State in terms of sheer talent. Lane Kiffin did a tremendous job bringing in transfers, high quality transfers. That was a loaded team. And what did it do? It went out, it beat Georgia, but it lost to a bad Kentucky team. And then it goes down to Florida with everything on the line and loses to Florida, which was it media. It finished strong, but it was still at best maybe an 8-5 team. So it had its chances. It had more than one chance. It got a second chance, win at Florida and prove you belong in the playoffs, but it couldn't. I think you got to be held accountable. You didn't get it done, and how you could lose to Kentucky. I mean, you could make a case. Anybody that loses to Kentucky, that Kentucky team does not belong in a playoff.
Yeah,
really.
No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, I think we are more in the camp that it's okay. We would rather see the regular season valued, even if it means a few good teams are left out of the playoff. We're not kicking out undefeated teams or 12-1 teams, but we're okay with a few good teams who didn't get it done to the extent that they needed to in the regular season being left out.
I would be okay if it went to back to an 8-team playoff.
Scale it back. Scale it
Yeah.
back. Well, that brings us to Steve Sarkisian, because Steve Sarkisian, the coach at Texas, has said he'd be okay if it went back to a 4-team playoff. Steve Sarkisian's had a lot of other things to say this offseason as well, including the now infamous basket weaving comment when discussing the academics at Ole Miss. And he also took a thinly veiled shot at Texas Tech in an interview with On3 earlier this offseason. Steve Sarkisian said, quote, "There's a team in our state that plays in another conference that has a schedule that I would argue, if I played it with our 2s and 3s, meaning his second and third string, we would go undefeated." Now, he didn't specifically mention Texas Tech, but the widespread belief that the team in the other conference from the state of Texas that Steve Sarkisian is referring to there is not Rice, but Texas Tech. And Texas Tech has taken the opportunity for a PR win here, and it has said it will play Texas in week 1 this season. If Texas would agree to a game in either Lubbock or at a neutral site in Jerry World in Texas, Texas Tech will buy out the group of 5 opponents that Texas and Texas Tech are scheduled to play in week 1. Texas Tech has said not only will they buy out their own week 1 opponent, they will buy out Texas's week 1 opponent if Texas can't afford to pay the bill, and they'll meet Texas on the field in week 1. Now, of course, Texas is not going to take this bait, because who does Texas play in week 2, John? Ohio State. They're not going to open their season with Texas Tech and Ohio State. But I thought this was a real public relations win here from Cody Campbell University. Oh, did I just call it that? I mean, the school formerly known as Texas Tech, that's now Cody Campbell University, seeing this opportunity and knowing that Steve Sarkisian's never going to take the bait here and saying, "Hey, come on and play us if you think the Big 12's so weak." What'd you think of this? Is this a win in Texas Tech's camp, or you seeing something here where Steve Sarkisian comes out of this looking a little better than I think he does?
It's not only a win in Texas Tech's camp, it's a really nice win for the Red Raiders. It also makes me wonder what's going on with Steve Sarkisian.
And I think that's the bigger point. You nailed it. Continue.
Yeah, just why are you saying these things? We expect Lane Kiffin to needle other schools, to pop off on social media. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. But this seems out of character for Steve Sarkisian. I don't remember things like this in the past, where just going out of his way to needle Ole Miss and talk about academics. I don't think any coach in college football should be talking about academics. Not with an army of tutors, online courses. And when was the last time any prominent player in college football on a prominent team was kicked off the team for academic failures? It just doesn't happen anymore.
Or the other way around, chose a team out of the transfer portal because of its academic prestige. Do we think Cam Coleman transferred to Texas for its academic prestige? I don't know Cam Coleman, but I'm pretty sure Cam Coleman's goal is to take a nicely paid deal this year at Texas, to have a great season, and then go to the NFL. Right?
Those 2 high-profile running backs that Texas landed out of the portal, they didn't go to Texas for a chance to make more money. They went there to perhaps there's a field of study that they feel like could enhance their future careers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really weird. And then to do that with Texas Tech, can you imagine how this could play out? What if Texas ends up facing Texas Tech in a first-round playoff game?
Oh, I hope I'm there. I hope that's what happens.
I just coaches don't coaches other than Lane Kiffin don't usually say things like that. They just don't.
And it makes you wonder why, as a question you've raised, John, and I've been asked that question. I've kind of gone back and forth trying to answer it, and I think here's what I've landed on. I think Steve Sarkisian feels really sensitive to the fact that Ole Miss made the playoff last year, that Texas Tech made the playoff last year, and that despite his war chest in Austin, his team didn't make the playoff. Now, I don't know if administrators, his bosses, have demanded an explanation from Sark for why he didn't make the playoffs. I don't know that that's the case. Maybe nobody's demanded an answer from Sark as to why they didn't make the playoff last year, but he just feels sensitive about it. And so he's trying to offer explanations. And his explanation with Ole Miss is, well, they don't have our academic standards. Don't give me a break. We've already discussed that. Who's transferring, worrying about academics at this point? When was the last time you heard about anybody getting suspended because they couldn't meet the academic standards? And then his explanation for Texas Tech is, well, they play in a weaker conference. Well, maybe so, but they blasted everybody from that conference, and the playoff rules say if you do that, you win your conference championship out of the Big 12, well, come on down. You make it to the playoff. And so I think this comes from a place of sensitivity for Sark, feeling like he has to explain why he didn't make the playoff last year. And actually, I don't require an explanation. I don't. It wasn't a successful season last year. They failed to meet expectations. But the 2 previous years, Sark had made the semifinals. Texas had made the semifinals. Now, they aren't going to build him a statue for that. But Texas's program had been pretty bleak for quite a while. And so I think Sarkisian had built up some goodwill by taking him to the playoff semifinals in back-to-back years. He'd turned Texas from a laughingstock, as it was for many years, into a legitimate frontline program. Now, he didn't get it done last year, but I don't know that anybody was calling for his head, calling for his job. Like, just go out and get it done this year. Don't feel sensitive about it. We know why you didn't make the playoff last year, because you blew it in the swamp. You lost to a bad Gators team. No other explanation necessary. Just go out and get it done this year. But it feels like he senses some need. Again, I don't know whether it's his administration demanding answers, or he just is feeling vulnerable and sensitive and feeling like he has to provide answers to questions nobody are really asking.
I think it also has something to do with the expectations at Texas.
Yeah.
Which has so many resources. And you look at Texas football, it last won a national title in 2005. Oklahoma's had a more successful football history. But Texas football, in a way, it's kind of a myth. It's perceived as this awesome football program, and it's in a state where football matters. You go down to the high school level, it probably matters more there than anywhere. Texas is all about football. And here you have the marquee university in the state, and it's not winning championships. And yes, he's improved things, but do you really think that the heavy hitting boosters there, or just the average fan, are saying, well, we went to the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years. Man, that's pretty good stuff. No. They think they should be winning championships. And they've got all these resources. They've got all this NIL money, and they aren't. He's lining up excuses. And you look at this team. He's got Arch Manning, who's one of the leading candidates for the Heisman Trophy, came on strong at the end of last year. So he's got probably one of the biggest name quarterbacks in the country. He's brought in all these key transfers. His team is loaded, seemingly, and it's going to be number one in some preseason by publications or predictions. I think you could say it's a favorite in the SEC, but maybe between Texas and Georgia. I would pick Texas based on talent. So I think he's saying, hey, people say we have all this in our favor, but look at the things that work against us. These high academic standards, all those transfers, the credits they built up at other schools don't all transfer here like they do at Ole Miss. How many fans want to hear that? And now call it out Texas Tech. I wouldn't even bring attention to what Texas Tech is doing. I just leave Texas Tech alone.
Yeah, just pretend best you can they don't exist, because
Yes.
the more you bring them into existence in the forefront, the more people are talking about, well, Texas Tech did make the playoff last year and Texas didn't, and now, as we've said, this is an opportunity for a public relations win for Texas Tech when they know good and well Texas isn't going to take them up on this offer. There's no way Texas is going to start the season playing the Red Raiders in week 1 and the Buckeyes in week 2, but you know, they kind of stepped in it. Texas did. Steve
Yeah.
Sarkisian did. They opened the door, and Texas Tech and Cody Campbell walked right through. But and I think part of this may too be Sark feeling some pressure of the schedule this season, because they missed the playoffs last year. You mentioned got Arch Manning back this year, got all those transfers in there, including Coleman, one of the most ballyhooed wide receiver transfers in the country. And then you look at this schedule with 5 teams on it that'll probably be preseason top 15. You got Ohio State, you have Oklahoma, Ole Miss, LSU, Texas A&M. That's 5 teams. I think they'll all be preseason top 15. You know, you lose to 3 of them, you're right back where you were last year at 9-3. And then I think there will be some more demanding of explanations and answers. So it's like he's almost laying the groundwork early for what if this season doesn't meet the bar. Well, I'm sorry, but talking about Ole Miss's academic standards, that's that's not going to be a viable excuse if Texas doesn't get it done this year with Arch Manning and that very expensive roster they've assembled.
He's feeling the heat. I think he's feeling the heat.
That's the bottom line. All right, John, we'll leave it there. Enjoyed the discussion. Been an interesting offseason, hasn't it?
It really has.
Yeah.
These coaches have come through. I appreciate John Sumrall when Texas and Ole Miss were going at it with the basket weaving comment. I mean, he could have set that out. He didn't have a dog in that fight. He posted on social media, said we're proud to what a great academic institution we have, and we offer advanced basket weaving.
Yeah, Summerall's not been afraid to kind of announce his presence, even as the new coach in the SEC. He's kind of stuck himself out there more so than some of the other first-year coaches in this conference. Really, the coaches are kind of doing our job for us. Normally, it's our job this time of year to stir the pot a little bit. Coaches are the ones stirring the pot most vigorously. Still a couple more months here of offseason to go. John and I will stick with you each and every week for the most part leading up to kickoff. We hope you stick with us as well. Thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered.